Welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila for a wonderful program. We'll be speaking about music. We'll be speaking about music in the 3 weeks. We have Rabbi Doniel Neustadt. He used to be the Bezdin of Detroit. Today he's a Rav in Lakewood. All the halachas you wanted to know about music in the 3 weeks. He will also be speaking about, since music is the topic, about downloading music off the internet. Basically what they call stealing music. Is it permitted or not? We will have from Teaneck, New Jersey, Rabbi Chaim Jachter speaking about Kol Isha Erva. What is it on the radio too? If you don't see the woman, if it's been electronically changed, etc., is canned music have a din of Kol Isha Erva. We will have Rabbi Elisha Sandler from the 5 towns, Yeshiva Shar Yashuv, Mashgiach. He will speak about what is Jewish music. Can you take non-Jewish music, put Jewish words into it, and presto, turn it into Jewish music? Is there something called Jewish music? We will have Sherwood Goffen, the famous Chazzan, composer, Jewish author of history, teaches the history of Jewish music. He will tell us some surprising things about the history of Jewish music. Are there Hasidic songs that were taken from non-Jewish sources? Is this a new thing, taking, existing world music, transforming it into Jewish? Is that just happening now with the current, hip-hop, rap, faster music? Or has this been going on for centuries? His answers will surprise you. And then we will have the famous composer, Boruch Levine, the world-famous composer. He will be speaking about what is Jewish music supposed to be, the hashkafa of Jewish music. So we have it both from a halacha and a hashkafa standpoint. It's really a wonderful program, very timely for the 3 weeks. Before we start, this is a long program. I will say a short part. This parsha, Parshas HaTamid, we learn the concept, Movad Olas HaBoker, Kol HaTadir Mechaverei Tadir Kaidem, Tadir V'She'enei Tadir Tadir Kaidem. So a carbon that's Tadir comes before one, and many halachas in Shabbos. We make Kiddush and Shabbos before Yom Tov, all these halachas. But I think there's a relevant thing to it in our daily lives. What is that? Imagine you have a Yom Tov, comes once a year, Pesach, your mother, your wife, they scrub the house. You went flying to some remote destination. It's the most exciting time. You made a huge bonfire, beer chametz. Comes to Kiddush at night, and it's also Friday night. What should you start with? Of course, Pesach. It's like the World Series of Yom Tovim. The first thing. No, I'm sorry. Tadir v'she'enei tadir, tadir kaidem. What does this tell us? A lot of us get dejected. We don't feel like heroes in our lives. What's the hero? He's doing exciting things. He's jumping, he's running, he's catching. Right? We live very simple and mundane lives, right? Most of us, we learn, we daven, we go to work, or we don't go to work, we go learn, we take care of our children or our parents, we plug along. You know what the Torah tells us? Being an amazing person is not about being a hero. Tadir v'she'enei tadir, tadir kaidem. The tadir, the person who is consistent and shows up and does what he's supposed to do, that is the most valuable thing. It's great to be a hero too, but the most important thing is to show up and do what you're supposed to do. And for us who feel that our lives are hoi polloi, boring, etc., I think this is a reason to be happy. Before we go to our guests, I want to announce 2 announcements. First of all, at the end of this program, we will be announcing the Riddle winner for both last week and this week. We left out last week. And then I want to play one caller over, and I'm choosing this caller not because something about he said, but I've gotten a bunch of calls that said the same question. That was, we said last week that it's a Chilul Hashem. If you go onto a plane and you're sitting in the middle, and next to you there's a woman who's dressed, you feel maybe inappropriately, maybe it's still some Aruba Michamsa, and you feel that it's not sneezing and you want to change. So we said that if you insist upon, make a fuss, and they had recently made it into the papers, in fact, they delayed planes, etc., it's a Shiloh of Chilul Hashem. And a number of people disagreed vociferously. They said, if you're doing what's halachically correct, it can't be a chil Hashem. If somebody says, how could you be shaking a lulav? Isn't that absurd? Is that a chil Hashem that you're shaking a lulav? Avadanat. If you're putting a box on your head and you pray with a box on your head, it's a chil Hashem? Of course not. That's absurd. He said, why are we doing something that is halachically correct? That you believe to have, how could that be a chil Hashem? A number of callers said this.
Hi, this is, I would like to comment about the question about sitting next to a woman on planes. And as one of your speakers has mentioned, that people always bring up Chil Hashem when it comes to these things. And I think Chil Hashem is one of the most probably misunderstood concepts in Yiddishkeit. It's thrown around way too often. And I think it's a chutzpah on Halal's part. And I think everyone would agree that if there would be a Buddhist monk who would be assuming that there would be makbid on such things, he would probably be given a free first-class seat. And, he would get very nice coverage. Now, it happens to be that Halal is run by a bunch of Friars who have a sin-up for frum people. And therefore, when a frum person tries to do the Ratzon Hashem, they make it into backward, crazy, religious people. That is chas v'shalom to call that a Chil Hashem. Chil Hashem is doing something that's Machal Shem Shemayim. If someone doesn't like Hashem, then that's his problem, and that's not your problem. It's not a Chil Hashem. You have to do the Ratzon Hashem, and killing Amalek, is big Parshas Pinchas. Pinchas was a very, very unpopular person when he did what he did. And, I'm sure nowadays the modern Orthodox community would tell Pinchas that he's making a Chil Hashem. But anyone who has his head screwed on right and has a little bit of Kavod Shemayim knows that Kavod Shemayim means doing the Ratzon Hashem. If doing the Ratzon Hashem means not sitting next to a lady, then Chil Hashem is not your cheshbon. And even if someone's going to say, and people say, so that's the Gemara's definition of Chil Hashem. So if a person has a little more sense in his head, he'll realize that that's doing something that's connected to Ratzon Hashem. Even in a Chaim, it doesn't have to be a Bepersha Isser, but something that's the Ratzon Hashem cannot possibly be a Chil Hashem. Thank you very much.
So I would like to respond. If you have a right to do what you're doing, you have a right to put on tefillin, mezuzah, etc., and somebody says it's silly, it's not a Chil Hashem, without a suffix. It's the first sermon in Shulchan Aruch. But here it's a different thing. You entered into a commercial contract with the airline that says you are buying a seat, and in the ticket it says they have a right to give you a seat that they want. Now you come onto the plane and you see the seat that you signed a contract for, you entered into an agreement for, a commercial agreement, is not the seat you want. So you want to renegotiate the contract, in effect, by making a big fuss, intimidate to make changes in the contract. To me, it's the equivalent of going into a restaurant that says on the window, we serve chalav stam, and starting to holler and bang that you want chalav Yisrael. Well, nobody asked you to go into that restaurant. Don't eat at home. Don't eat fast that day, right? Nobody asked you to fly. You have a number of options. It's a commercial contract. You could fly by buying an extra seat next to you. You could not fly. You could go by boat. You could not go to the simcha. You could take your wife with you. You could take a Mashgiach with you, buy it for a bacha. This is a commercial agreement. Nobody asked you. So you were trying to renegotiate something on somebody else's cheshbon. Who is that? Either the airline or the person sitting next to you. That is the Chil Hashem. The Chil Hashem is not that you're practicing your belief. 100% you can practice your belief, but not on somebody else's cheshbon when you willingly entered into a contract. I hope that I clarified at least the way I understand it a little bit. Now let's go to the riddles. One, Gemara in Sanhedrin and Daf Pei Beis says that if Zimri would have turned around and killed Pinchas, he would have been pata, and he would have been allowed to. Because even though Kanayim Payyabai, since it's not a halacha psuka, Zimri would have been allowed to kill Pinchas. So the Welt asks a great kash on this. They say the halacha is every time you're allowed to kill a roidif, there's a halacha that if you can save him by shooting him in the leg, and instead you shot him in the head, you had time, you were able to shoot him in the leg, instead you shot him in the head, you're chayiv. Because you're supposed to hold din of hatzal of saving somebody who's running after somebody. A roidif, the heter to stop the roidif is with the minimum force. It's an American law too. The policeman could shoot somebody in the leg and he shoots him in the head, and they could prove that he could have. He's chayiv. So the Welt asks, how could Zimri possibly be pata for killing Pinchas? He says if he turned around, he would have been allowed to kill Pinchas. There was a much simpler way to stop it. All he had to do is be pirish Isha. The whole halacha of Kanayim Paigim by his Vishas Maisa, that means if Pinchas would have stopped doing, if Zimri would have stopped his abhorrent action, Pinchas wouldn't have been allowed to kill him. So how could Zimri possibly be allowed to kill Pinchas? He could do a much more minimal thing, separate, and that's Yachal Atzila Bechem Mevarav. The fact that he wants to continue and kill Pinchas because he doesn't want to be Pirish, that should be that he used more force than necessary, and Zimri should be Chayiv Misa. So how is it possible to say that Ilu Pirish Zimri and Ilu Nepach Zimri V'harag Pinchas, he would have been Pater? It's not true. He would have been Chayiv. That's a famous Welt Shaila on the opening pasuk in the Torah in this week's parsha. Let me ask you one more riddle. It says another thing we say. This is regarding the 3 weeks. Shnayim layoyim elasamid umarim psachim anun chesam days says from the fact that it says v'arach Allah ha'oila with a hey, we learn that nothing comes before the Tamid Shel Shachar. Tamid Shel Shachar has to be the first carbon in the morning. Question is, the Gemara in Ruchani says, and in Aleph Amid Beis, when they came, the Oivim came into the Heichal, they saw that they were saying Shira ala carbon. How could they be saying Shira on a carbon on Tisha B'Av, right, before they destroyed it, where the Gemara says in Tainus and Daf Chavav that on Shivasa b'Tamuz Batla Tamid, if there was no more Tamid, how could they be possibly bringing Karbanis at the time of the Carbon? Those are the two riddles. Call in your answers. Next week we will announce our winners. Let's go to our wonderful program. We have the honor of having with us on the phone Rabbi Doniel Neustadt, who is formerly the Av Bezdin of Detroit. He is the editor of the Mechaber. He wrote Emes Liyaakov, his grandfather of Yankiv Kamenetsky, the Gadol of America, the great Ashkenaz of America. Emes Liyaakov, he was the author of. And today he is the Rav in Pine River Village. Welcome. It's an honor to have you on with us, Rabbi Neustadt.
Good morning.
Rabbi Neustadt, could you give us sort of like a quick primer on the halachas of music in the 3 weeks?
Okay, the halachas of music in the 3 weeks in a quick primer are as follows. That actually in the origin of the halacha, in the real source, it doesn't say anything about playing music. There's no strict issur about that. In the original sources, all it really speaks about is rikudin and mechalos, which translates to different types of dancing, and that's also, and not just in the chasana format, which is also on its own, but any kind of a dancing is forbidden during the 3 weeks. But all the contemporary poskim already for decades and decades have included listening to any kinds of music. It makes no difference if it's taped or if it's live music. Either way, it's considered a part of the issur of the 3 weeks. The early poskim didn't really talk about it because they didn't have music, access to music like we do. There was no tapes, there was no CDs. All that thing is, relatively new. But since these things have been incorporated into our daily lives, all of the poskim agree that any type of music playing is included. Essentially, because music will can bring a person to dance. So it's part of the greater issur of rikudin and mechalos, and that's what music generally does. Different kinds of music might lead to different kinds of dancing, but in general, music playing brings to rikudin and mechalos, to dancing, and therefore it is part of the greater issur that has been around for a long time. And
what
today,
about sad
this
music?
has been
Rabbi Neustadt, what about sad music?
Sad music really it should not be part of this issur. You're right. You have a good point that if it's going to bring you to cry, then it's really not usur. But most music doesn't bring you to cry. It gives you pleasure. Even if it's slow, it gives you pleasure. Even if you may not do a fast dance, you may do a waltz or a slow dance. All that is usur. So any kind of music which brings to any kind of a dancing or could possibly bring to any kind of a dancing is included. But if it will be a tearjerker,
what about a cappella?
That might be
Rabbi
something.
Neustadt, what about a cappella?
Okay, so the a cappella, and a cappella is a bit controversial, but if you ask me, a cappella is included into the Isser. It's just as forbidden, and for the exact same reason. Because a cappella, once the person listens to it, it brings him to dancing just like live music. Once you hear the a cappella over the CD, it makes no difference if you're hearing a musical instrument or you're hearing a musical sound. Either way, it brings you to dancing. And therefore, since that's the origin behind the prohibition, it makes no difference if it's a cappella or if it's real instruments. It makes no difference. Both are forbidden.
Well, what about if it's not a cappella? Are you allowed to sing in the shower? I mean,
you're allowed to sing in the shower.
But if any singing could bring you happiness, is there any music
right.
that's allowed?
But singing by yourself, singing as a group, it should not be done in general. But singing by yourself, they didn't forbid that. That's not forbidden. But a person who sings by himself doesn't usually get up and start waltzing around the room. That's not natural, generally.
Okay. So you say taped music and a cappella would be the same Isser. What about somebody who suffers from mood issues and they need music to keep themselves, sort of functional?
Okay, so there is flexibility over there. But we don't like to give a general rule, so a person should discuss this with the Rav. But there's room for leniency because l'tzarich mitzvah, music is really mutter. If you're performing a mitzvah, there's a lot of leniency, and it's certainly a big affair for a person to be sad or depressed or sick. So we will find a way to help such a person listen to music in private. It shouldn't be done in public, but it should be done to himself. If he needs it for emotional or mental reasons, there's plenty of flexibility, but a shaila should be asked. Nobody should pass that on their own. They should ask a shaila. Let me just add that once this has been accepted by Klal Yisrael, even though, again, in the Paiskim itself, this is not mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, but today it's a minig, it's a universal minig. So it goes into al titosh Torah semecha. We don't have the power just to let it go. It's minig shenohagu boy kol Yisrael. All Jews have accepted this upon themselves, and it's not an individualistic decision. So therefore, we have to accept it. But, like anything else, there's room in halacha for special situations, such as the ones that you mentioned.
Now, let me ask you two more special situations. Somebody has piano lessons. They take them every week. They're supposed to practice for an hour. Are they allowed to practice for an hour during the 3 weeks? Or do they have to stop?
Look, in general, we would tell them that if they could stop and it's not going to inhibit them, it's not going to result in any problem for them, we ask them to stop. We generally advise to stop. But sometimes, especially if a person is doing this for parnasa, if a person is doing it so that he can have a way to play and professionally make some money, that will be permitted. If a person needs it for, some children need it for emotional support, they need it to do something, children which are, have anxiety, we would allow it then. So in general, we discourage it, but we would find solutions for special situations.
So somebody who plays, let's say, for their living, they play in a band or they play and they have to play for
that's okay. They could practice.
On the radio
they could
station,
practice.
etc. Well, I'm sorry?
They could practice, yes.
Could they play also? Somebody
who are they playing for? Who are they playing for?
Well, he's playing for WNBC, for WCBS. He does the music between the channels
yes.
or whatever.
If he's getting paid for it, if it's a job, yes. Yes, you could. Yes.
Okay. Are there any other points about the 3 weeks that I missed, Rabbi Neustadt, that you feel is important?
About the 3 weeks, about the music part of it?
When I was a bacha, I remember hearing that Rav Hutner said canned music is allowed. And Moshe says specifically not, tape music is not. Did you ever recall hearing such an opinion?
No. There is opinions about, some opinions about singing which is taped. There are some people who are stringent about that more because they feel that the tape itself is considered a musical instrument. In other words, if you would hear it a lot by mouth, it'll be okay. But if you hear it from a machine, So it's possible to say that the machine itself is an instrument and therefore it should be worse. But Moshe doesn't seem to go with that, and that is debatable.
Regardless, Rabbi Neustadt, you believe a cappella would be usher anyway, so it wouldn't really matter.
But a cappella which mimics music, or a cappella which is right. That's right.
So let's switch to a different topic. So your favorite Chazzan singer is on the internet, and with one swipe of a button, you could download all their albums for free. Right? I mean, you could download.
You could?
Somebody was telling me, we were discussing this by the table Shabbos. Somebody works for a very large public pension fund, and they said one of the questions they ask during interviews is, have you downloaded music for free off the internet? To see how people respond. But I think that the vast majority, certainly of teenagers today, and I don't say teenagers in any way in a deprecating manner, it's just that I'm not such an expert at downloading off the internet. They do have downloaded music. 98%, I think, have downloaded music or movies off the internet. Is there a shaila, besides let's stay away from Dina de Malchusa, would that be a shaila of Gezel or Menem Mishal Chazzan? Is there a problem with downloading Mordechai Ben David, a Helfgott? Pick your favorite. I'm probably aging myself. Pick your favorite musician, let the Schmelzer, etc. Is there any problem downloading this off the internet?
I think it is a problem. I don't think it's a problem of Gzela per se, because you're not really doing a mice of Gzela, but it does go into the area of Hasagas Gvul. In other words, these artists have spent a lot of money and time and effort to produce their music. This is their livelihood. Every time that a person avoids paying for their labor and for their efforts, you are masig their gvul. You're taking away their parnasa from what they invested in. And
but respectfully, Rabbi Neustadt, respectfully, I'm not talking about somebody who is downloading it to sell it to somebody else, but he's just doing it for his own purposes. And I don't believe Hasagas Gvul would rely on where you're not doing commerce with it. You're just doing it to be an NF from it. Let's assume somebody's doing it for their own purposes,
that's not true.
Not to sell it. Okay.
No, there's no difference if you're doing it for your own purposes or for sell. The artist who made the music wants you as an individual to buy it. Right? He invested money, so you as an individual buys it. When you are short-circuiting that and don't buy it and get it for free, you are hurting and roaching into his parnasa. You're massing his gvul that he invested money to make money. Of course, it's worse if you are doing it in order to do.
Can you think of an example in the Shulchan Aruch where you have Hasagas Gvul where it is not for commerce purposes but is for my own use?
There's no difference. The Hasagas Gvul does not. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say Hasagas Gvul is for commercial purposes only. This is commercial to the artist. He every time he sells an album, he makes money. When you are not paying for it, you're shortcutting his commercialism. He's trying to make a business, and you are taking his product for free. The fact that you use it for yourself or share it with half your family or your cousins or relatives or sell it, that's not the point. The point is that you're short-circuiting his investment and not allowing him to profit from his own investment. And that's also to do. It's to a fellow Jew. So because of that, it's a gezel. It may not be gezel, especially once it's in the public arena, once it's in the internet, which is a question exactly how you define that. And the Supreme Court doesn't know how to define exactly what the internet is. But a gezel it may not be. But Hasagas Gvul, in my opinion, it certainly is. You're allowed to maybe make one backup. You buy a tape, a CD, and you're afraid it'll scratch or break, you're allowed to make a backup. That perhaps might be mutter, but no more than that, because any more than that, he could sell 10, and you're sharing it with your 10 siblings and cousins, and you can't do that.
Let me share with you another possibility, Rabbi Neustadt. The Night of Yehuda discusses a very interesting case. He says somebody made a chumash with a pirush on it, and he spent a lot of money. And then after he printed it, in the olden days, they used to use like metal, typeset metal. Somebody offered to buy the typeset off of him And he agreed, and he sold him the metal. And he didn't know that this guy would reuse the chumash. He thought he was using it because he wanted the letters, to break it back into letters. This guy stripped the pirush off the bottom, then put his own pirush on the bottom, printed his own chumash, and sold it. So the first guy came and he said, listen, I didn't know you were using it for the chumash part, and it cost me a fortune to typeset each letter, stick together each little metal cube, letter by letter, and I want to be paid for the value of the top. So first the Rebbi Yehuda says, well, you sold it to him for metal. He could do with it what he wants. And then the Rebbi Yehuda says, it has a din of nene mishal chaverei. You're not allowed to benefit from your chaver's work. He says it's like the Gemara in Baba Basra and the Shulchan and the Kuftin and Vav and Zion that says that hamakif is chaverei. Somebody builds a fence. Somebody has a field, and the fellow in the middle has his field, and the guy around them puts a fence all around them. So Halacha is you have to pay the outlier if you use the fence, his fencing, under certain situations. So he says, even though you didn't cost them anything, the bottom line is you're benefiting from the value of somebody else's work. And he says, therefore, the fellow who is using the typeset that the other fellow had discarded, there's no pirush on the bottom, would have to pay. And noticeably, the other Achrayim in the Baruch Tam right on the spot argues on Rebbi Yehuda. But I'm wondering if you think that would be comparable. Here I am stealing the benefit of I'm not stealing, but I'm using the benefit of your hard work. What do you think of that as a comparison?
It's somewhat of a comparison. I mean, this goes back even earlier than the Rebbi Yehuda. The Ramah already dealt with this with the Rambam. The Rambam was printed by one publisher, and then another publisher printed the Rambam as well, and he was using the efforts that another person put in, and the Ramah rules stringently about this. This is a famous case with the Maram Pagava. There's a lot of literature about this. There's a lot of different shittus and deis. But over here, I think it's a little bit worse. I mean, you're actually taking something that this person is selling, and you are taking it for free. You're taking an item which is in the store that costs $20, and you are taking it for free. The guy's not selling it to you in order to give to your family and to share with other people. He's giving you one copy, and you are taking it and you are using it for more copies. It's perhaps even worse in the case of the Rebbi Yehuda. And there's a lot of talk about this, but to me, it's not a question nowadays.
Rabbi Neustadt, let me ask you a question. If somebody has a campfire, they're in the woods, and somebody comes and they say, look, I would like to light a candle off of your fire. And he says, no, if you want to light a candle, it's $25. Now this guy sticks his match in or his candle, and he lights his candle off the other guy's candle or off the other guy's bonfire. Do you think that the fellow who lit the candle will have to pay? I mean, the guy's got his. But that's the case of Sandler and Chazzan. Why wouldn't it be comparable?
I said that's the case of Sandler and Chazzan, because I'm missing absolutely nothing. When you take fire from my fire,
I would like to charge you. I want to charge you $25 to light from my fire.
So, right. So if the person who made the campfire invested money into the campfire, he had to buy special wood. He had to rent the area where the campfire.
Regular wood.
You want regular wood, right? I was saying especially for this fire. He had to invest money for this fire. He had to rent the area where the campfire is taking place. He had to prepare for it. He put in time and effort, and he wants to be compensated for his time and effort. And somebody says, I want to take you fire for free. No, he can't. He can't. He's running a business.
You would be able to charge him to light the candle, you believe?
If he has a right to, because he invested money, and he's actually, it will depend. And also, if he did it for a business. In other words, when he made his campfire, did he do it so he could roast his hot dogs? Or he did it so that other people could get fire too and he could charge them? Over here, when the artist makes the musical CD, he's not doing it for his pleasure. He's doing it to sell. It's a business. And you are encroaching on his business. So the cases are completely not comparable unless the campfire is there so people can have fire. To charge for it, so that he could. If not, if he's doing it for his own pleasure and he's doing it anyway, so then it's like Zen and Zen Chas. That would be midas daim to go ahead and stop the person from doing it. But here, it's different. If the artist would know that people are just downloading his music and copying it, and he loses his investment, would he have invested? Would he have done it? Speak to any artist and they'll tell you that they're losing money by this.
Can you think of a halacha in Shulchan Aruch that tells you this fact, that if I take something from you and you are not chasser at all, that I still have to pay you?
You're very much chasser. You invested $30,000 in making a CD, and you're not getting your investment.
You still have your entire fire. I didn't take one speck of fire from you.
But again, why did you make this fire? Did you make this fire so you could charge?
I'm very sympathetic to that, but I didn't take anything from you.
You took my investment.
I didn't take
your investment. I made the fire hoping to charge for the fire. What? The reason why. But again, why did I make the fire? Did I make a fire so I can make a business out of it?
Let's say you made the
fire. Is that the case that you're referring to?
Rabbi Neustadt, let's say on the side of my house, I'm Picasso. I paint the most magnificent picture to charge people when they look at it. Can I then say anybody who's walking in Rosh Hashanah and takes a deliberate view at the side of my house where I painted the picture now has to pay me because I painted this picture to make money? Or the other guy says, you have your picture. I'm not touching your picture. I'm not using your picture. Why should I pay you for your picture?
No comparison.
Picture just for money. What would you say?
No comparison whatsoever. Because you can't charge a person who's not taking anything from you. You can't stop a person from looking. It's a free domain. He's walking in the street. He's not doing anything. It's like a smell. It's like a voice. It's like a sight. That's not considered any type of ano at all. But over here, you're taking something that the person has produced, and he is there it's to sell, and you are taking the item and thinking it's not the same. It's completely two different cases.
Okay, so in closing, Rabbi, so you believe that downloading off the internet would be usher, and it would be because of Hasagan Zoll.
Right.
Well, Rabbi Neustadt, it's an honor, as always, to have you on with us. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, very good. A good Shabbos. Be well.
We have on the phone with us from Teaneck, New Jersey, Rabbi Chaim Jachter, who's the Rav of Shaarei Orah in Teaneck. He's a Dayan on the Bezdin of Elizabeth, as well as the Rabbinical Council of America. He's a Rebbi in the Torah Academy of Bergen County. He's the author of 5 Sfarim, including 4 volumes on gray matter, which is contemporary halacha. Welcome, Rabbi Jachter.
Great to be here.
Rabbi Jachter, we know that Kol Be'isha Erva, right? It's Machlokes, is it Daraisa, Drabanan, etc. Is that only live, or would that be radio as well?
So that's a big Machlokes. Rav Yosef is Mako. If it's not if you don't know the person, and other Rabbanim are much more machmir than that.
So walk us through the explanation of Rabbi Vaj's as vis-a-vis Rabbi Yashuv or other Rabbanim. How would you explain it?
So Rav Yosef believes, look, if it's on the radio, it's not technically the call. Just like you can't be Yotzei Megillah Esther, Kriyas Megillah, Kiev Shofar on a radio, and that you should be listening to Shofar on Yom Tov. But just like it's not considered to be a call, it's just an electronic reproduction of the voice. So technically speaking, it's not a call. And also, the Gemara tells that Ein Yetzahar Shoet El B'Mashein of Rose. You don't see it. You don't see the person. There's really no Yetzahara. So you're just listening. You don't see the person. Then Rav Yosef and some other poskim are makel on this issue, but on one condition, that you don't know the person. As long as you don't know the person, there's no relationship with the person, you've never seen a picture of the person, then we're not worried that the Yetzirah is going to overtake the person. However, other Rabbanim are adopting a more machmir attitude, and I would say it's just important to add that other Rabbanim feel that it's important to be machmir about these kind of issues because these kind of issues of tznius that we're living in a society that unfortunately is just the opposite. It's terrible in terms of the priestess. So some will believe that we have to be extra careful in our door about issues that maybe in previous generations one could have been mako, but in our generations one has to be more machmir and more careful not to fall into the traps of the outside culture.
Now, do you think, Rabbi Jachter, that given that today, music is so ubiquitous, it's like on your iPhone, on your iPad, on your it's like wherever you go, that we've become desensitized to Jewish music. So let's say some of it to woman's voice. So maybe some of the earlier poskim, I know the Mashgiach discusses, this goes back a way, would feel differently or no?
I don't think so. Chazzan make zeros and lo plug rabbanan. No exceptions. If we have a halachic basis, let's say by a recording, there's what to talk about. But to say that we're murgal, that we're used to it, I don't know. It's not a route that the conventional poskim like to take.
No, but I'm talking about by a recording. That since by a recording it wasn't part of the initial gezerah. I believe that's what Rabbi Vadia speaks about. But Moshe writes that, let's say, about music, recorded music in the 3 weeks or etc. He says during the year, even though he was machmir like the Rambam, he says on recorded music, he says there was no gezerah. So is it possible that if it's a drabanan, today, I'm just saying, using that position, we could sort of say the same opinion of Ramosha, where you don't make gezerah where they didn't have it, and since they didn't have it in those days, clearly the Rabbanan didn't answer it.
Okay, I hear.
He writes two tshuvas about listening to recorded music during the year, and he says even though there's an isser of shir, right, b'shir al tishtayayin, etc. He says, look, what they didn't have, they didn't asa. Okay.
Right.
So let me ask you another question. What happens if you buy the Shabbos table and you have boys and girls, you have teenagers? Could the girls sing?
That's also an old machloket. There's a famous tshuva of the Sridiesh, who is Rabbi Weinberg, and he was a big posek, an important posek. And he was mako. He felt it was necessary to be mako. Boys and girls can smear together. I want to say the Yitzhahara is not sholate on Zmiros, it's Sukadusha, and many other poskim were against it. Look, in some communities it's accepted to follow Rav Weinberg's tshuva. In other communities it's not acceptable. It's interesting. Just an interesting anecdote to relate that I used to drive Rav Soloveitchik to the airport when I was a Talmud at Yeshiva University. So I asked him if he agreed with this tshuva of Rav Weinberg, and he said that he agreed. He said that he agrees with almost everything that Rav Weinberg wrote. He happened to be had a close relationship with Rav Weinberg in the years that he spent in Germany. But most of the Rabbanim don't really accept this tshuva from the Sridiesh.
Is it possible that with siblings, even those who disagree with Rabbi Weinberg, would be minded that a sister and a brother could sing Zmiras together? Are there opinions on that? So, like for example, for example, there are many. We spoke about this. To my knowledge, there are no shitas. You're not allowed to look. It's a sarbi sharva, kolbi sharva, right? Right. It doesn't say that a brother cannot look at his sister's hair after she's married, right? By any, to my knowledge, it's not brought by any of at least the this generation poskim. So the question would be then, if there's no issa for a brother to look at his sister's hair after she's married, why? Because it's considered that the arayas that there's kurva that ain't li by noik shalom noikfa, etc. that there would be no Isser Histaklis. Would there be a svara to say that Lagabe listening to his sister sing after her bas mitzvah, you would have the same svara? If there's no Isser to look at a makkah mechusa, they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's an excellent svara.
So is it possible that even those who argue on this 3-day Asian say that if a bunch of, let's say you're in camp, it would be very relevant. You're a head counselor in a girls' camp, and there's 100 girls singing together. So they say Trei Koili Lo Mishtami, and therefore there's no Cheshek, and Rabbi Weinberg would be matter it. I think Rabbi Yankiv Kamenetsky was matter it, and many answered it. But even the Eisrim would agree, or possibly agree, that brothers and sisters by the Shabbos table should be allowed to sing together. Do you have an opinion on that?
I definitely agree for brother and sister. I think they would definitely be matter brother and sister. There's no doubt. I think there's no doubt. It's interesting. More of a delicate issue is with the husband and wife at certain times. That's a very, very big machlokas. The Piskei Tshuva quotes at Tzarach Iyon. Rav Yosef is makel on that issue. Of Moshe's Machmer on that issue. That's an interesting family issue. But siblings, as far as I'm concerned, I never saw anyone say that was usher. It's very mistaber that it's mutter.
Right. Where other shilas of Elisha are there today that you think that maybe people are not aware of?
Well, the question is, when does it start? At what age?
Right.
So poskim will say, well, Ramosha says the age 11, right? Because he writes. Nowadays, girls become nidos at age 11, so it's also getting a little bit delicate. But
which is similar to the Bir Halacha in Simonai and Hay, I believe, takes that position, or brings that opinion that it would be 11.
And if you're gonna take that approach, the Chor should be a little bit earlier today because that age is getting earlier than it was in previous generations. So. The Orah one would have to go a little bit more machmir on that, a little bit earlier, maybe age 9, to take that down a little bit because it's just biologically people saying it's starting a little bit earlier. So that's something that's something to be aware of, and it's also important to be aware of that. People will think, oh, it's a microphone, it's okay. No, it's not. A microphone is not going to be matir. If you see the person, the only time that we're okay with the recording is it's going to A, it's a recording, and B, you don't see the person. But if it's a microphone and you see the person, that's already included in the gzeira of Chazal, and it would be us.
Would it matter if it's a very old woman? Or you have a 90-year-old woman singing the Star Spangled Banner. Would that be a problem?
I think it is a problem. I think it's actually very insulting to a woman to say to her that she's not attractive. So it's not only not proper ben adam lamakom, it's also very improper ben adam lachavero to be makel on an issue to a 90-year-old woman. It's insulting to her to say that she's no longer attractive. So even if she's 90 years old, still 100 years old, 120 years old, still the issur of Elisha would apply. In general about music, we should be very, very careful about the music that we listen to. The Gemara tells us that it can have a tremendous impact on us. It could be something that's very positive. It's something that could be very, very negative. Certainly in the Beis HaMikdash, we see that music can be extremely positive. And on the other hand, and certainly in Shul, it could be very, very positive. But on the other hand, we find that Elisha ben Avuya, the Tana that sadly left the derech, the Gemara Chagiga tells us that one of the prime reasons for his leaving the derech was that Zema Yavani la pasak mipume. They didn't stop listening to Greek music. So music can take us away. It can really sway us. So we have to be. It can sway us and take us in the wrong direction. So we have to be very, very careful about the music that we listen to. And people who live surrounded by positive music are in a much, much better place spiritually than people who live with surrounded by music which is negative.
So, Rabbi Jachter, let me ask you the following question: what's your? I know this is many paiskim that. Could you discuss that topic? Taking a Gaisha song, putting Hebrew words to it, and using it by tefillah.
There's room to be makel on it. Rabbi Yosef has a tshuva about this. You're sort of converting the song. Just like we have an idea of gerus by the person, we have a gerus for a song, but it should be used properly. In other words, if it's something that the people know the outside song, and it's going to be a joke. Yom Kippur, people will say, "Oh yeah, he's singing such and such song," and it just takes away from the davening. So in theory, it could work, but if people recognize the song and it's going to lead to a zilzul, so it's something that we should stay away from. So it could be done, but you just have to be careful.
So there's nothing wrong with reappropriating, saying being Megayer a song. That's I love a fantastic. You said you could be Megayer a song.
Megayer a song? Yeah, but bring it to base matters only under appropriate.
So let me ask you a question. When you hear some of the modern music, and I've asked my producer to put together like a little collage where people are taking rap and hip-hop or whatever it is, the more modern songs today, and turning them into Jewish music. So older people like myself, we listen to it, we get outraged, and younger people say, well, we've been doing that for 1,000 years. And when they first heard the first waltz, from the first Mashgiach waltz, people were outraged probably then too. And that you're hearing the first rap or hip-hop, you're being outraged too, and we're doing no different than what's being done for 1,000 years. How would you respond to that?
I think the youth are right. I mean, there's a big difference between davening. You introduce a song a tune that people are familiar with from the outside world, and introducing it to davening becomes a zilzul. That's something I have to be very careful about. But just for regular music, it's a good thing. You're keeping people, especially the young generation, interested in Jewish music, and they need to be interested in Jewish music. Jewish music is essential to a spiritual life, and as long as it's not something that's negative content, it could be whatever tune, whatever tune it can be. We can Megayer the tune and introduce it into Jewish music. It's true. It has been done for 1,000 years.
And you think staying relevant and contemporary is important for Jewish youth as long as the content is in sync with our value system.
Correct, because it's a competition. You want to make sure they're listening to Jewish music; they're not listening to the negative music. It's a huge need to stay away from the negative music. So if it's music that's going to attract the younger generation, and they're going to enjoy it, and they're going to listen to it, and they're going to be listening to the words that are from Psukim and positive words, then it's a wonderful thing.
Rabbi Jachter, thank you very much for your time. As always, it's an honor to have you on with us.
It's great to be on your show.
Health of a good day. Bye-bye. We have on the phone with us from Far Rockaway, Rabbi Elisha Sandler, who's the Mashgiach in Shar Yashuv. He's also the Rav of Kehillas Beis Yisrael in Far Rockaway. He's also the author of a sefer called Through Music and Song. Welcome, Rabbi Sandler.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, Rabbi Sandler, when they take non-Jewish music and they put Jewish words to it, is there anything inappropriate, or are they just harvesting the best of what the non-Jewish world has to offer us? Like we take their flour, we make bakery goods, we use their their air conditioning and their et cetera, or is there a difference?
Yeah, there definitely is a difference. The Svarim that talk about this basically use the concept of Koyach HaPoel Banifal, which basically means that the effect of the one who makes something is in the thing that he makes. So when it comes to, let's say, your example of harvesting wheat and making flour, and then it's made into bread and we eat that, it's something that somebody's hands made. It's coming from the hands of somebody. It's coming from a very external point in the person who made whatever it is. A person that makes a table. So it's coming from a very external point of the person. And also once it's done, it's basically done. The table is the table. The flour is the flour. So what I saw in some of the Svarim is that the Koyach HaPoel Banifal that comes to music is that music is an expression of really one of the innermost parts of a person. And a person, through his music, through his song, whether it's playing music, whether it's composing music, whether it's singing music, really brings out a koyach pnimi, or at least should be bringing out a part of him that's very, very deep, that it's coming from the neshama. And the person who listens to it, the reason that music moves us and the way that it moves us is because it penetrates and connects to the innermost parts of the person who's listening to music. In other words, it's able to capture, the music's able to capture that feeling, that whatever it is that came out of the pnim, and put it into the pnim of the people who are listening to it. And therefore, it's taka not so pashut. I can't tell you that it's aser per se. Rabbi Yaakov Hillel has a tshuva where he says that the Shabsai Tzvi and his followers, the reason that they went off was because they did just this, that they took a nigunim of Gayim and applied Jewish lyrics to it. And he says that it's documented that was the beginning of the end with them. Okay, but I can't tell you that it's asur per se, but it's definitely something that captures that feeling and instills the feeling, and that's why it's definitely not recommended.
So, Rabbi Sandler, we had on a Jewish music historian, a Chazzan Goffen, Sherwood Goffen, and he said that much of our music comes from certainly the influence. He said, the waltzes that they made in Europe, the Chassidish Rebbis, came from the Mozart's influence on the waltz, or whoever the composers were from that period. And he said he named a bunch of songs that were used by davening that the Yekish took from, German bar hall songs, sort of. And he says the Chabad has Napoleon's niggin. So he says it's been going on for 1,000 years, where even if it's not the exact song, certainly the style of the music, and sometimes he says it is the exact song, but the style of the contemporary music. And I think that if we look at music today, if you go to the Teimanim, they have well, clearly that's influenced because they live in the Middle East. And you listen to the most contemporary Jewish music in America, it has a very American influence because American music is very different than Arabian music. So
right.
My question to you is anything different happening? I remember recently I saw an article and it said like this. It said, today's youth do not honor their parents. It wasn't like when we were young where there was real respect for parents. Today's children are wild, and then it says on the bottom, New York Times, 1877. So my question is this been going on for 1,000 years and we are just outraged by it because, it so doesn't sound like Mashgiach or Kalbach, and then, hey, Mashgiach was very influenced by what's going on in Europe in the 1800s, and, they didn't sing Mashgiach in the Beis HaMikdash. It was much more Mediterranean type of music. So is maybe some of our outrage a little bit misplaced? And I don't have an opinion on it because I personally, when I hear like these very guyish, rip. It's just not how I grew up. But that's what my father probably said that about Kalbach. My Zayda said it. So are we just repeating what our parents said to us in a different form?
It could be to some degree, but I think that there are differences. In other words, there's a Ritva in Rosh Hashanah who talks about. There's a sugya over there on Daf Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimel, where the Gemara talks about the difference in what the trua is. Is the trua a moaning sound? Is it a wailing sound? So the Ritva says, he says, what went wrong? How did everybody forget? They heard the trua last year. So what happened? The Gemara says that Rabbi Abba went and he said that first it should be Genuche Ganach and then Yulule Yalil, and you should do Genuche by itself, Yulule by itself, and the Rishonim bring from Rav Hai Gaon and others that it became forgotten. And how did it become forgotten? So the way the Ritva says it's a big chiddush, but this is what he says. He says that depending on the generations, what was a wailing sound in one door is perhaps not such a wailing sound in a different door, depending on the circumstances, on the culture. Things changed, and what was so it was hard to express it. The Sfas says that he speaks about Tekiah Shofar specifically. He says that each galus had its own way of krachting. So Mamela, when all the different galuyas came together, and there are different ways of expressing different sounds, and each generation has its way. So the fact that something is influenced by the surroundings, I think there's a tshuva from the Maram Tilun Zata, and he has a sefer Shtei Yadas where he speaks about. He says that all of his piyutim he put to Arabic type songs because they reached crescendos that other ones didn't. So definitely, are we influenced? Yeah, I could live with that. That we're influenced, but the question is, what is it speaking to? Is it speaking to the neshama? Is it speaking to the core? Is it? I once asked the Rebelsky Zecharna Levracha, what, if anything, is Jewish music? Is there such a thing as Jewish music? So he said, music that only speaks to the guf, that just elicits all kinds of contortions and movements, but he says it's hard to call that Jewish music. Music that speaks to the neshama. If different people are more fast-paced people have a certain style, more slow-paced people have a different style. I don't know that that's the kaveya, but it's what is it connecting to? What is it relating to? Is it bringing me somewhere? Is it connecting me? Is it or is it just a big distraction? Is it just something that's if I'm singing something composed by a guy, again, I don't know how to answer the Chabad's Napoleon March. I don't know who composed that particular song. If perhaps Gedolim were able to tell that there was a specific song that really wasn't the taka came from a good place. Maybe they were able to be selective. It's really hard to know. I'll tell you a very painful story that happened with me. I taught for about 18 years. I taught in a high school. And there was a boy who would come in whose taste of music was definitely not mine. It was a very loud, banging, every once in a while he'd come, he'd put his headphones on and say, Rebbi, I want you to listen to this. I'd listen for about 3 seconds and get a headache. One day he comes and he plays me, and all that I'm listening to, screaming and shouting. I said to me, this is ridiculous. It's not even a beat. And he says to me, you know who that was? That was my father and my stepmother fighting last night. And now you know why I listen to this music, because at least I put some rhythm to it. Sometimes we listen to music that just that relates to where we're at. It's hard to call this the right type or the wrong type, but what is it doing? What is it?
So you're saying Jewish music is music that speaks to the neshama and not to the guf. Is that sort of what
right.
What Rabelsky told you? So then would it be fair to say, and that if somebody took a very spiritual non-Jewish song that came from non-Jewish sources and put Jewish words to it, that would be you would consider that basically Jewish music? Like we had Rabbi Jachter said, he said that if you put words to a spiritual song, you megayer the song. Would you agree with that or not?
Well, somewhat. In other words, it's definitely speaking to the soul, like you're saying. It's not just speaking to the guf, and therefore that would accommodate that. The problem is, and this comes from the Chassidish Sfarim, because The Birkas Shmuel doesn't discuss this stuff. But, that once a person does open up his neshama, once a person does expose that pneumistic part, we have to be very careful what goes in there. The Aksharas Avrechem has a whole place over there in Perek Tes where he talks about how you could have people that are musicians that sometimes become extremely, extremely decadent people, and that their music is beautiful, and they sing beautifully. They could sing other people's songs beautifully. He says, but what a person does once his neshama is open, or what goes in once the neshama is open, a person needs to be very, very careful with.
Can I
add
really
hits a pneumistic? Sure.
Can I add lib to what you're saying? In other words,
sure.
When we take a Goyish song, that's right, and we put beautiful Hebrew words to it, but we could assume that this is an album that probably had some dancer on it or some singer on it who's probably dressed boifin, that it was Tzilsa Meruba Michamsa, for lack of a better word. And so it conjures up that image when we sing that song. So it could be it's a spiritual song, but you have to look at it in the entire picture. What is the effect of singing a song when it's, attached to a certain image, to a certain lifestyle, to a certain... So it's not just a song, but what are we importing? What's the wrapper that comes along with the song? Is that what you were saying?
Exactly.
So here's an interesting question. Rav Haigayin, a tshuva from Rav Haigayin, that where he talks about, the Gemara says, this is in Shuvas Hagayinim, Siman Samach, I'll quote it, he says, Masha Asa Rav Huna Zemer Shel Umni Bursaki. He didn't, the Gemara says over there in Saitan Daf Memches, Bashir al Tishtayayin. He says, Pirush Ma'abdi Eris. He says, V'bnei Shechakar V'dora Shachrav. He investigated them, and V'noichech Ladash Yesh B'y Divrei Pritzis V'kalos Reish U'lechein Astro. The ilu, this exact lashon of Haigayin, kishenoicher shahazemeh shel royeh bakar. If you would examine the songs and there would be no pretis for dvarim mechwarim, the yesh bohem sad b'aveidasim, and it would help you in your work, it would be mutter. So it's interesting. Rav Haigayin seems to be saying that you look at the song, and if the song is something that comes from a hadinit divrei pritzas kalish reish, sort of what you said over from Reb Belsky, then avada such a song would be asa. But if it was a neutral song and it was just a song, he says, or it was an amid, now I'm amid living. Certainly, if it was a song that was ma'ira certain hargoshes pnimius, then l'chayra there would be room to be matir, assuming there were no external factors, secular factors that would be reasons to question that decision. Is that what? Am I being sadler time?
Yeah, there would be room. No, and Hanami, there would be room. I can't tell you that everybody agrees with that, but there would be room for that. The outward influence that comes from, like what you're describing, from the knowing the artist and knowing the style and things like that. But sometimes there's just an inherent something that's there. Again, I can't say that it's Asurum.
Rabbi Sandler, you work in the 5 towns, you're a Rebbi, and it's certainly not a ghetto cloister type of bacher. What do you say to the argument that it's important to be relevant, and if we're singing our Zaydis Nagunim, and these teenage kids, they're not connecting to it because they are living it, they are Americans. So basically, they're going to say, I don't want ay, and umpa is what interests me, so I'm going to listen to umpa, and therefore we have to be relevant in our music. And current to that, the singing words, they're influenced by Americans, the music, because that's the current society, but we're putting psukim and divrei shirim or tishbachis in it, vis-a-vis. What's your feeling to that opinion?
Yes, I guess for that I could just tell my own experience. Talking about the 5 towns, there's a Yid who lives here in the 5 towns, Eitan Katz, who his music's very simple. It's not complicated. He's a great musician. I find that when boys are exposed to, even if they're used to something that's much more rocky or the contemporary, but when they're exposed to good music, some of them like the instrument, some of them they could really be trained. They'll appreciate a good niggin. I really have found that. Bringing them to a late a Thursday night comes to a Friday night on Shabbos, singing good nigunim. It doesn't have to be with a painful ayah, it doesn't have to be Baruch Bez Sim Shalom. That might be a little harder. But if music is good and it's quality and it's warm and it's I've seen it work. I don't know that we always have to change everything to fit where they're at. Where we could lift them up and show them something that is a little more contemporary and with good music, and I've really seen them respond. I've seen them respond very well. I don't know that we always have to be going down to exactly where society's latest thing is. That's just my experience with it. In terms of this issue, I don't think that this should be the lechatchila of where we're going. In other words, the music does have an effect. Is the insinuations of and the soul of the one who composes, who put out that music the first time it came around, that's in it. And I think that there's definitely enough sources to say that when avoidable, it is something that should be avoided. If it's something that a person bedafka needs to connect to, wants to connect to, it's the only thing that a person is responding to, then I think we could work with it. Putting psukim and to beats. It's not pasha to listen to psukim. I'm sure you've gone through it. It's a Gemara that says that psukim shouldn't be used as entertainment. Psukim are used. The person needs to be thinking of the meaning of the words of the psukim. Ramesh has a tshuva. Reb Shlomo Zalman writes about it. Az nidbaru, even Torah Shabbal Peh. That if a person doesn't understand what's being said, a person's not thinking about the words, then it's a kinor shemenagnim ba'leitzim, and a person shouldn't be using it in that way. So I think that if the lyrics are going to be bringing out the melody or the rhythm as opposed to the rhythm enhancing the words, if it's something that brings out the meaning of the words, maybe if somebody needs it, so you will be lenient in that regard. But to use the words as a hechetinsa just to be machshir, the niggin, is something that I have a very hard time with. The Ramatizio, when he writes about music, and he says that one of the concerns that he has is that there's a never-ending barrage. The fact that we're always listening and always need to be hearing music. He says it kind of like numbs our senses. And music is supposed to be something that's special, that when we listen to it, it gets us, it chaps us, it evokes something in us. But when it's something that we have all the time, nonstop, it becomes very difficult. It becomes difficult, to respond for music to work in the way music is supposed to work. And he says also it becomes something which is, in his words, just doesn't give us the time to think. Sometimes a person, I get into the car, I've got to put on my music. I go for a jog, I'm putting on my music. I sit down in the house, I'm with the music. Sometimes without that, I think it would be a nice thing to welcome the opportunity to have some peace of mind, to be able to, number one, to appreciate the music when we listen to, but also for a person to detox himself a little bit from being constantly attached and connected to it.
Well, Rabbi Sandler, thank you very much. And if anybody wants to purchase Rabbi Sandler's fabulous safe, I believe it's the only one written on the hashkafa of music, where can they buy the safe for Rabbi Sandler?
It's through Israel Bookshop. That's the best way to order it. But anybody else could order it from there as well. Well,
thank you very much for joining us, Rabbi Sandler.
Thank you very much. Kol tov, Hachlach.
We have the honor of having with us on the phone Sherwood Goffen. He was a Chazzan for 53 years at Lincoln Square Synagogue. He's an instructor of Nusach at Yeshiva University. He has a 35-year career as he was the music, the voice of the Russian Jewry movement. He has a degree in Chazanis from Rabbi Chaim from the Bell School of Music. He is probably the foremost Jewish music historian. Welcome, Sherwood. Or is it Mr.
Hello,
Goffen?
Shalom, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, question for you. I grew up on Mashgiach Nigunim. That's what my father sang at home. I guess Kalbach
too. The original, the best, right?
and I guess Kalba too. And then when we used to wrote in like the more modern music, which was then Mordechai ben David, etc. So I remember like the look of outrage by the older people in the shul. Oh, how could you sing those modern nigunim? So my question is, we see the impact of modern music on our music. We see the impact of, rock and roll and rap. In fact, I know a lot of songs that we sang in. Is this something that has begun in the last 30, 40, 50 years, or have Jews historically always has there been some type of osmosis of music from the non-Jewish world into the Jewish world, and maybe even a lot of those Heilige Mashgiach, Chabadska, Gera marches, whatever they may be, may actually be seated in Gaisha music? Could you give us a little history on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when it comes to using the Gudim and davening, that's something else we can talk about. As far as Jewish music and where the music comes from, this has always been, wherever a Jew has been in the world, the music of that particular country and that particular style always filtered into Jewish music. Now, of course, I give you a couple of examples, but the fact of the matter is that we always took from the style of the country that we're in. Now, you're talking about Mudgets. You're talking about Ger. Now, we know Ger for sure. Yankel Talmud copied the Polish marches, military songs in his Nigunim and Ger. Mudgets.
Could you give us an example? Could you give us an example of a Ger Nigun that you say is taken from a non-Jewish source?
Well, we don't know if it's a non-Jewish source, but he followed the style of the Polish marches that he remembered.
Could you give us an example?
You're listening to a military orchestra play that kind of music. Now, whether exactly note for note, I don't know. But now, for instance, let's go back to Lubavitch. Lubavitch has something called the Napoleon's Nigun. When Napoleon and his army came into Russia, playing there, and the orchestra played. The Hasidim said, when the Mashiach comes, that's the nigun that they're going to play. So that became a holy nigun. Die, 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 die. That's the. So
that's the Polish. Really, how interesting.
Yeah, and they sing it on Simchas Torah. This happened throughout. There were you go back 1,000 years, and you'll find that many of the Rabbanim had to tell their Chazanim that they were forbidden from going to churches and standing behind Marachi Pargod, listening to the music, and they would take it into shul. And just the opposite, you had emperors, and you had archbishops. Archbishop Odo in Western Europe forbade his people from going into the synagogue and taking music from the synagogue and bringing it into the churches. So there was always a cross-pollination, one or the other. Now, for instance, today, you're right. Today, take a typical Mudgets again. So
where's that from?
That's the Wolf. So the Rebbe who created that 150 years ago or so, he was influenced by the style of the waltz that was heard in the countries in those worlds. He didn't do it note for note necessarily. Even a lot of it may have come in. We don't know how much of it came from the originals, but the color of all nigunim were always a reflection of the style of music. Today that's true, and it was true then too.
So did the German Jews have their own music that was like similar to German music? Did the Arabic Jews who lived in Arabian countries have their music?
Let's take an old German nigunim. The oldest German nigunim is Elizion, for instance. That's back to the 16th century, 15th century. So, and that was very rhythmical and almost, I hate to say it, but almost like a beer song in a tavern, da dum ba bum ba dee da da dum ba yum ba bum ba bee 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 bum ba bum ba bee ba bum. That's a beer song. That's a rhythmic song. Now, of course, the Jews when they moved from Germany towards Eastern Europe, the East European Chazanim were known for not being able to do anything in rhythm. They could not sing a niggin in rhythm. So instead of the yum ba bum ba 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 bum ba bum ba bum, they went Elisha in the Orah. That's on Nusach. That's on Nusach.
They liturgized it. Yeah, okay.
They liturgized it, right, because they couldn't sing it. So, and we even use that niggin now in our own davening. For instance, why are we using it there in Kasher at Sisa? Because it reminds us that the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, from Elisha. But most of the old German Agudim were like that. The Shar is from the Germans. They're all, for instance, right? So they're rhythmical type of thing you would sing in a beer hall. But that was the style of that time. So, the style of the country. Germans always did things in rhythm, very formal. We in Europe, in Eastern Europe, we became a little more, looser, because the style of the music in those days was different. But you're talking about music that people sing and perform. When you're singing Nigudim at a Kumsitz, or you're singing Nigudim even at a Shal Shudas, I don't think it really matters where it came from necessarily, because we have a history of that. The music always impacted the style of the country. Always impacted on music. So sometimes we overdo it. Nowadays we're using rock and roll. Okay, I mean Mordechai Ben David took a German punk rock song from a group called Genghis Khan for which was the niggin? Yidden, right. That was Yidden. I believe you know what that's from? That's from Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, written by a guy. But the niggin is so beautiful, and by the way, the English words in the Joseph and Technicolor Dreamcoat says, because I have a land of my own. Close every door to me, but it doesn't matter to me because I have a land of my own. It was so it has a Yiddish tom to begin with. But there was always cross-pollination, so I wouldn't get excited about it. If a person doesn't like the rock and roll stuff, so don't buy it. Take something that's more traditional. And that's the best I can suggest. And the old Mudgitzer and the Lubavitchers, they were still influenced by the country in which they were, but nowadays that we have electronic music, with the guitars and the whole thing, and so everybody has to. More and more of that is filtering into our modern music today.
So why then?
I'm a guitar player.
So let me ask you. So why do I'm sure your father and your Zaydis, when they would hear you singing modern music in Yiddish tunes, they would get all upset. Why do they get upset if they basically did the same thing? They did the waltzes from Mozart or from Bach. They did the German beer songs. They copied the style, if not the niggin, in Germany.
Because
so why is that?
They didn't hear the orchestras playing it. They heard the Zayda singing it. The Zayda's gesingt on niggin, and he sang it with neshama, with hearts. He didn't hear the background. He didn't hear the umpas. He didn't hear the electric guitars. They just heard the pure niggin. Heard the pure niggin. Pure niggin had the neshama of its own. So that's what appealed to them.
So let me ask you a question, Sherwood. In a lot of what Jews do, look, our dress, even if you take Hasidic dress, right? If you take a bekisha, it has the same collar as basically a coat. Right, it has the same buttons.
Well, you know what that is. It was the Polish nobleman of the 17th century.
Okay.
He wore a shtreimel. He wore that kind of coat. So a Jew on Shabbos wanted to be like a king, like a melech. So he copied the Polish nobleman. To
say that on Shabbos we're all malachim. So,
that's right.
But I'm saying the style of clothing, even if you're Hasidic, comes a certain extent from non-Jews. The language we speak is, I guess, if you speak Yiddish, but Yiddish is also German. Let's face it. So
right.
we, the Jews, have taken the best of all the Zion Amimim. This is what we believe, and through Torah we've improved it. We will meshaper it. We take a steak. We take a piece of meat. We turn it into with hakavana. We turn it into holy. We're not supposed to be separate from the world. We're supposed to take. The reason of Golus is to go into every part and to take the tzaitzis and be mekadosh them. Why, when it comes to music in particular, do so many of us get outraged when we see a Goyish influence, and we don't get as outraged when we see it in clothing, when we see it in the style of our homes? We sit on couches, we have dining room tables like everybody else, we use phones like everybody else, the Shabbos table has a tablecloth like everybody else, the chairs are the style of everybody else, our shoes. But when it comes to music, everybody gets outraged. Why is that?
The Beis Hamikdash. When the Beis Hamikdash was charev, the Rabbanim ushered music, both vocal, by the way, and instrumental. Because there was an orchestra in the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
The orchestra played on Shabbos even. You couldn't have a korban. The major korbanos were not legal unless there were at least 12 instruments. And you had to have 12 voice choir. Once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so this was asur. The voice was asur, and music and instruments were asur. You couldn't, ein gozrim al tzibur, what the tzibur cannot handle. So you couldn't stop the Jewish voice from singing. So eventually they had to give and allow the Jewish voice to sing. But there was an isser on musical instruments in weddings. The Rambam was the first to allow two instruments, a minimum of 2 or 3 instruments at a wedding. So music has always been, and there are people who have ushered music until today. You look through the Sfarim, they still say, you really shouldn't use music. Even Moshe Feinstein hinted to it. There shouldn't be musical instruments. So somehow we've inherited this thread of maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe we really shouldn't be doing this. If we're doing this, we're going to be more critical at what's coming out. Look, you look at something good. You go to a wedding, right? And they start dancing up and down, jumping up and down, right? If some of these nigunim make you jump up and down in the middle, all of a sudden you got to start jumping up and down. They just felt it wasn't appropriate, that there should be restrictions in how happy we should be. That's why we break a glass at a chuppah. So I think this is a whole thread, a whole coloring throughout history of music, even when we were allowed to use music eventually. And it's still in effect today. It keeps reminding us that maybe we're not supposed to do this. That's my take on it.
How interesting! You're saying since the whole heter to sing music is b'diavad, so that therefore they were sort of more sensitive about music.
We sort of felt a little guilty. Hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. If we shouldn't be doing this, man, so at least we should do it right. Let's do the best that we can do it. Let's do it the way our Zetas and Bubbas did it.
Let me ask you a question. You're an expert in Nusach. You've taught Nusach for many years. You've been a Chazzan for many years. What is the Mekoyer of our Nusach, both Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and during the year?
Okay. It's based on the Maharil. The Maharil, who lived from 1365 to 1427. He was the chief rabbi of the Rhineland. Therefore, he was like the chief rabbi of the world, because the most Jews in the world lived on the Rhineland. And Speyer, Worms, Mainz, Troyes, Rottenburg. And he was their chief rabbi. And he was also a Talmud of the Maharami Rutenberg before him, who started to already decide that there are certain nigunim that were traditional that you couldn't change, based on a number of things that happen. If you have to read the Seder Maharil, you'll know why. He came out with the psak that ein l'shanos minhag ha'ir afilu b'nigunim. You can't change the music of a certain community, even according
which
to
the Mechaber brings the Halacha, which the Shulchan Aruch brings the Halacha.
Right, the Ramah quotes him, right, the slight change in the word. So the Al Yishana Adam, whatever, So, therefore, we are very makbid about keeping these. Now, people don't always know what they are. There are 52 phrases of music in the music of the Maril's Nigunim, which we call skarbova, from the Slavic word which means treasure. That these Nigunim cannot be changed. They're changing. They're not allowed to change them. Now, if we have the Maril set them up, he taught them. Of course, they didn't know music, so it was taught by orally. So it came down orally. Your great grandfather taught your grandfather, who taught your father, who taught you. So when we hear Ochi la kel achalefanav eshalom imen. Now that's also the same nusach for the beginning of the Chazar shots for Shachris also.
Well, that comes from the Maril.
That's Maril. That's called.
Now, do we have that in music? Do we know?
That's called the Krova mode.
How do we know that? How do we know that? How do we know that it comes from? And did we have music notes from that era?
No, nobody. Jews didn't know how to write music until the 1700s.
So how do you know that's from the Maril?
Because you go into a German shul. Stand at the Amid and change one of their Nagunim. What are they going to do with you? They'll take you and throw you out of the window. If you go to by Sfarden, the same thing. You change something that is supposed to be that everybody knows how it's supposed to go. They'll get rid of you. This was very makbid. We were very makbid about it. That we knew exactly how it was supposed to sound, and we taught that to our children. Were there shinuyim? Obviously, there were some shinuyim. I give you an example with the Elitzion, where it went to East Europe. But certain things we knew. We knew how Aleinu l'Shabeach sounded. Aleinu l'Shabeach. We know we can't change that. That came back. That's already from the 9th century. That's from the 800s. From the 800s. We already know from earlier.
Could it be earlier than that? Could it possibly go back to the Beis HaMikdash?
No, we have nothing from the Beis HaMikdash.
Do we know? How do you know that?
Well, because again, look. If you wrote a niggin 150 years ago, we don't remember that niggin anymore either. Most of the Zmiras today, for example, is only 100.
No, but how do we know that Aleinu, let's say, did not come from the Beis HaMikdash?
That's because we know where Aleinu came from.
Okay, where did it come from?
We know that Rabbi Colonimus was in the court of Charlemagne, and at that time there was a writer who wrote music. He wrote a folk book. Charlemagne's musician Paul Diaconus. In that folk book, there is da 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 da. That it's not Aleinu actually. That was Boruch. I'm talking about the Boruch. The Boruch is the oldest. Aleinu is from the 11th century. I'll tell you how we know that too. That Baruch was already in this folk book of Paul Diaconus in the 9th and 10th century.
But how do we know where he got it? And where do we know where he got it from? Maybe he got it from.
We don't know,
earlier.
but we know that Meir Colonimus was in the same court at the same time. That Charlemagne needed to have communication with the Middle East, so he started bringing the Jews in. Now, how's he going to get the Jews to come in to France and Germany in the 9th century? He'll bring in the big Rabbanim. So he convinced Meir Colonimus to come from Italy and others to come from Bavel, and he paid them a big salary, and yes, the Jews came. So Meir Colonimus, we know, when he walked in the same time that Paul Diaconus lived, who was sitting in the court of Charlemagne writing these things. And we have his folk book, and it's in there. It's in there. You'll even hear it when, I'll give you this example. Caruso, the great singer, he put out a record of an old prayer. Have pity, O Lord. Pietà, Signore, di me dolente. What does he have in the middle there? Pietà, Signor, Signor Pietà. He has Paul Diaconus's niggin, which is our Baruch.
When you say the Baruch, which Baruch are you referring to?
Now we added on. We added that on. But the beginning, that's from the 9th century and from Ercolonimus.
And so he got it from a guy? Is that what you're saying?
We don't know. Did Paul Diakonis get it from him? Did he give it to Paul Diakonis? Nobody knows.
But so then let me ask you a question. Is it possible that it goes back way before him?
Well, we don't know how far back it goes.
We just don't know.
If you don't have proof, you can't say it. There are the Teimonim claim that they have nigunim that go back to the Beis Hamikdash.
And what would they be like?
We've sort of proved it. We've sort of proved it. You wouldn't recognize the nigunim at all. We don't sing that way anymore. But that's, by the way, how the music sounded in Beis Mikdash, probably. That we can't relate to it at all because we have a European sense of what music is supposed to sound like. We can't understand quarter notes that the Sephardim sing. They sing in 2 notes. They can sing a whole song. They're not singing half notes like we do. They're singing quarter notes. But the thing is that we have a Professor Edelson, who was the first great ethnomusicologist of the Jewish people. He lived in the last part of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and he wrote an encyclopedia of Jewish music, 14 huge volumes. He traveled around the world for 20-something years, and he recorded all the music of all the different people in the world, whether it was in India or was in Yemenite or was the Germans, South German, North Germany, Poland. He wrote down everything, and and Moroccans, by the way, Arabic music, and he was an expert. He got his PhD in Leipzig in Gregorian chant. He found that in some of the Gregorian chants, which is the holy music of the Goyim, which was standardized around the year 600, and that they claim even many of the original fathers of the church, like St. Augustine and Eusebius, claim that their music, we do our music according to the Hebrew. My Hallelujah is based on the music that I heard from the temple. We can never verify that, but Edelson found similarities.
For example, like which songs? For
certain
example,
nigunim of the Ammonites and certain nigunim of the Gregorians.
Like for example.
Well, they have a erutavit dadabonum escribe is what in Latin is one of the Gregorian chants. So I gave you an example.
So St. Augustine said that he took that from the Hebrews.
He has his music came from the Hebrews. Whether exactly that one or not, we don't know. But we know that when it was standardized in the year 600, that music we have. And we found among the Ammonites, they were singing, now you may say, hey, wait, this is so simple, anybody could do that. No. In ancient times, there was no such thing as by accident. These things, and I'm giving you the simplest. There were more complicated, which I don't remember. I have to look it up. But he gave some examples where he found that the Gregorian chants who never knew that Yemenite Jews existed, and the Yemenite Jews who never knew that Gregorians existed, singing the same style of melody.
I have a question for you, Mr. Chazzan Goffen, Professor Goffen. The Maril lived in the 1300s, right?
Right.
And he said on the Neustadt Tefillah, Ein L'Shaneis, which is what the Ramah brings, and that's how with Takamakbin, that's how it's changed in Neustadt Tefillah. If he made up the Neustadt Tefillah, why would he have been so careful, Ein L'Shaneis?
I don't know if he made it up. I don't think he made it up.
So doesn't it make more sense? For sure, doesn't it make more sense to say that if the Maril wrote, and the Maril wrote the Sefer HaMinhagim, which is really, the Shulchan Aruch uses that as basis. He's probably the most quoted. I don't know if he's the end of the Rishonim, beginning of the Achronim, but the Maril in Germany, Poland, is all the Minhagim go like the Maril. If he wrote on a minig,
quote something in Tefillah, he says Maril.
The Maril, yeah. So if the Maril wrote, Maril was, I believe, Mainz was one of the three great cities in Germany where the Jews lived.
Right.
Ramey Kleinemis also was from Mainz. So was Rav in Mainz, many centuries before that. But if he wrote on the Nusach HaTefillah Ein L'Shanos, is it unreasonable to say that he probably had it for generations and generations already, and he said, I want to keep this Nusach
I agree with you.
So
is it
possible?
He based it on Rothenberg and
Baruch. Yeah. So is it possible that it goes back 1,000 or 2,000 years before that? Do we have any reason to say not like that?
We don't know. We know certain things for sure. Aleinu we know comes from the 11th century.
But we don't know how much. So we don't know how much before that.
Writes in a sefer that he got a letter from Blois, B-L-O-I-S, in France, that Jews were herded into a shul, and the shul was burned down. And as the shul was burning, they heard a beautiful song, and they turned to one of the Jews that they kept aside because they need somebody to do money changing. They said, what's that? And they said, that's our holy Oleinu.
So it
could
we know
be that certain things.
So sure, we have no reason to believe if the Maril, you say, got it from Ramey Koinimis, who lived in the 10th century, it could go back easily 1,000 years before that too. Is that fair to say? We don't know, but it could be.
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. I can't say anything I don't know. I can only say that he felt at that point, he says it's Schoen Zeit to standardize it, stop it here. No more deteriorations. No more influences of the local country coming in and changing our nusach. We have to stop it right here. If you remember, there's a story in the Sefer HaMaril, the reason he did it, because he was traveling around and he went to a certain, he was the chief rabbi, obviously, a certain place in Germany, and they had a different minig for a certain style of a piyut, and he didn't listen to them. He did it his way. And when he got home, a month later, he found out his daughter had died, and he says, in the Sefer, that was his onesh for changing the nusach of that particular community. So he paskined there and then that you're not allowed to change the minig of a community, because as the Mishnah Berurah says, the Chaim says, because you'll be misbabel das atzira. You get up and you expect the guy to sing for Rosh Hashanah night. You've been waiting for a whole month of El. You've been waiting to hear. Right, you've been waiting for that. You've been doing stichas. You've been getting ready. You've LOL for that one first Boruch on Rosh Hashanah night, and the guy gets up and he says, Baruch Hashem, what would you do to that guy?
The song of Aleinu.
You would wring his neck.
The song of Aleinu, the story with the church. Where is that from? Which city was that?
The city of Blois, B-L-O-I-S, in France. In the year 1095, I think. We find it in the writings of Mayor of Orleans, who I think was one of the last of the Geonim, and he wrote that specifically. So I mean, we have examples where we can trace certain things back, but there's only a limit how far we can go back.
And that's the Aleinu that we sing in Shul today.
Aleinu, no, one only Avasheni Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
The one that we sing in Shul today is a children's song. First of all, the first part came from the church. If you listen to Rimsky-Korsakov's Russian Easter, you'll hear da 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 da. So this Reform composer wrote Aleinu, the first part. The middle part was written by a Reform composer called Sulzer. But he wrote beautifully. Da 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 da. And at the very end, the Ne'emar is written by the Goldfarbs, Rabbi Goldfarb, who wrote, by the way, Shalom Aleichem. He wrote that for a children's song. Ne'emar, you know what it really is? Three blind mice. And then the farmer in the dell. He took those nigunim for a junior congregation. So now every shul sings it like that. But, all right, new. But it's not the holy Maril Nigunim. It's not the Skarbova Nigunim. It's not the, those Nigunim are La Halacha, and you can't change it. That's why I get nervous when a famous song in Israel today, one of the most famous songs that just came out that everybody's singing is an Ochila Lakel, a popular Ochila Lakel. And people are starting to sing it in the place of Ochila Lakel. You know which one I'm talking about? Yeah, but there's a new popular niggin that just came out 2 years ago in Israel. Ochila Lakel, Achal Lefanov, Shalom, and people are saying to Chazonim, if you don't sing that, my whole Rosh Hashanah is killed. It's destroyed. So Chazanim are being forced to sing this now instead of the holy Ochila Lakel, which your Zayda treasured. And which we're not allowed to change.
The song of Ochila Lakel is one of the songs that comes from the Maril.
Yes, sure.
How do we know? Where are these? How do we know? Like, what are the songs? What are? And so you're right.
It's 52 motifs. We know it's brought down. Every German Baltfila learned it from their father, from their teacher, from his teacher. It came down, and not one note was changed.
How can I find them if I want to know what are these 52, so that you're not over the din of the Maril of that the Ramah brings in Elisha.
There are different.
They're not written anywhere. Are they on a tape anywhere? These 52.
Nobody ever wrote them down specifically. There are examples that were given from Professor Wahlberg of the seminary. He gave some examples. There's Eric Werner. There's a sefer they put out. But there's no list. There's no list.
What about the Boruch from the Neustadt of Yom Tif? Boruch
yes, that's
Is that from the Maril too? That's from the Maril too.
That's considered one of the Maril Gunim. Tal and Geshem for sure. The Kadeshim usually are the ones that are the most. Right. The Kadeshim are the ones that are definitely.
The Kaddish of Tal and Geshem, and the Neustadt.
You have to understand something else. That every paragraph of our Siddur Machzor has a certain style. Now, most people on your program, I hope, would know the difference between major and minor. If you're not, if you have no shachas of music, you probably don't know. But there's a style. Every single paragraph of our Siddur Machzor have a style, and you have to do it in that style. The Brechas Kriyashma have to be in Fregish. It's called Fregish. That's Fregish. So we know those brachas Kriyashma have to have that. We know this. This is transferred. You go into every shul, they all do it the same way. The beginning of the Chazar Shashatz. Baruch atah Hashem is the major style. It can't be in minor. You can't go Baruch atah Hashem. It has to be in the major style. This is all brought down too. But there are certain, within the painting of each of those paragraphs of a certain style. I'll give you an example. One paragraph is painted green. One paragraph is painted brown. Because it has a certain style to it. And you always have to keep that style.
Sure. What about the Nusach for... we spoke about the Nusach for Tal and Geshem. You say comes from the Maril. We don't know from where before that. You said the
only thing on Shabbos, by the way, is the Kaddish before Musaf.
Which saying the Shabbos Nusach doesn't come from the Maril?
Shabbos Nusach, the style. The style probably comes down through the Maril. The style. No, it's either whether major. We actually have 6 modes, not just major and not just minor. We have Fregish. We have Hashem Malach. We have. If I would sit down with you on the piano, I can show you that each of these paragraphs have a certain style. That is also fixed. But on Shabbos, the only thing that note for note is fixed that you can't change. No, I don't have to go Baruch atah Hashem. I don't have to do that. I can go Baruch atah Hashem. Okay, I can do that too, because I'm within the same getter. As long as I'm within that style, I can change the notes. The only thing you can't change on Shabbos is Yiskadal, Yiskadash, Shemirabo. That cannot be changed.
That's the Kaddish before Musaf. Yeah.
Right. The Young Israel movement changed it. There's a whole history to it why they changed it. I can't fault them because the Young Israel movement, the whole reason we sing in Shul today, you sing Kedusha and Kelodin and Lachadagi, is because of the Young Israel movement. They brought current congregational singing into davening. Before that, there was no congregational singing. We never sang a Kel Adam. We never
Europe,
sang a
you're saying
we have a Nusach.
Wait, you're saying the Hasidim that sing all Kel Adam, they didn't sing it in Europe? They only started to sing.
Yes, no, right. They started singing it after in the late 18th, early 18th century. They started singing the Gunim, but they only sang it for Kel Adam and the Chododi.
What did it? So I'm saying, so if they sang it, it's not coming from the Young Israel movement. They did it in the 17th century.
But no one else sang it because Mashgiach never followed the Hasidim. Whatever the Hasidim did, the Mashgiach never did. So they never sang it. What they did was they had choirs in the 1800s. The choirs wrote beautiful choir music, like we have even today. Even Shema Yisrael is the same thing. It was written by Reform composers. Young Israel took everything they could find that was beautiful, and they stuck it into the davening. So they made Dreisen too. They made mistakes. They made many mistakes. We all know that there is a nusach for Chadodi. The Chadodi, that's the real nusach. But is it holy? Not necessarily. What about Kel Adam? You walk into Shtiblach, you'll hear them. You'll hear it often. In fact, in Shomrei Muna Shul in Borough Park, they used only Nusach until about 20 years ago.
Now, where do most Hasidic songs come from?
It was composed by individuals. Well, Rebbis. A Rebbe had to write a niggin every Shabbos. Every week you had to write a niggin. So, but I'm saying is, that's fine. You can sing these nigunim, and it's good. The only thing that you can't change is the style, the color of each paragraph of davening.
Does it upset you when you hear Jewish songs that are sort of influenced by hip-hop or rap, etc., or not?
Yes, it does, because I don't think it's appropriate. When you're singing, I'll give you an example, right? Now, you sing Shema Kolenu, right? Sing Shema Kolenu on Slichas night, or for audience Slichas. Then you get to Hashivenu. Hashivenu Adon Shem. You're pleading HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And all of a sudden, some shul started doing Hashivenu Hashem Elech Avenu Vashuvu V'Vachar. Because it's a popular Shlomo Carlebach niggin. It's beautiful, but it doesn't fit there. You have to sing what fits. You have to sing something that's appropriate. You can't sing a happy niggin for a sad text, and lehefech. For a happy text, you can't sing a sad thing. So one has to be smart. That's why I think that until recently, shuls always had chazanim, tamidim, who studied this in great detail. And they were very makbid about the nusach. They were very makbid what kind of niggin they put into it. Today, we've thrown away, in the Orthodox world, we've thrown away the Chazzan. We've thrown him away, and we said, Yankel in the first row, we don't have to pay him. He has a nice voice. Let him get up there and do whatever he wants to do. That's the problem. He gets up and do whatever he wants to do. Now, I'm free now to travel around from place to place. My kids live in Baltimore side now. I have an apartment in Baltimore, but I still live in New York because I still daven Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur at my shul. They still want me to daven. Shabbos Chanukah, but I'm able to go around to other shuls in here. I hear what's going on. Some places the Balei Tefillah are beautiful Balei Tefillah, but some places it's miguna, totally miguna, because they throw anything they want in, but the kitchen sink. So you have to be careful. You have to be sensitive. That's why I bemoan the loss of Chazanim. I'm here in Baltimore now. When I came here in 1964 to sing for the Religious Zionists of America, I was a guitar player. So I traveled around the country for 35 years. I have 4 records that came out, popular records. My first record, I popularized the Nigunim of the Boston Rebbi. Or things of that sort. I popularized the Nigunim. Mehera. Now, I came in 1964. There were 10 Orthodox Chazonim full-time. Maybe not all of them got paid a full salary, but there were 10 Orthodox Chazonim full-time in shuls. Now there's only 1 left. And in Philadelphia, there are none.
Well, Professor Goffen, or is it Chazzan Goffen, it's been an honor to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. Shimon, thank you very much for your time.
All right, my pleasure. All the best.
Also, bye-bye. From Waterbury, Connecticut, we have with us Rabbi Baruch Levine, otherwise known as Baruch Levine. He's a singer, a songwriter. He's a Rebbi in Waterbury. He's well known to everybody in the Jewish music world. Welcome, Baruch.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I must say before we begin how much I personally enjoy listening to your show. You know, I travel often, and a lot of times, you know, looking for things, I guess, to pass time on an airplane or whatever it may be, and your shows are enlightening and they're inspiring, and it's something very refreshing. So thank you so much from a personal
You're welcome.
Perspective.
Thank you very much. So, Rabbi Levine, let me ask you a question. So, many songs out there are basically non-Jewish songs that they've put Jewish words into and turned them into Jewish music. So from a hashkafic point of view, what's your opinion on that?
So I think if I had to define what Jewish music is, it's such a loosely defined term. You know, is music that leaves one elevated with a feeling of devekis, kirva, simcha, hadah, tefillah, bakasha, fill in the blank, whatever feeling, but towards Hashem. Okay, in the subject of taking a secular tune and putting Jewish words to it, you know, it's again halachically, it's not something that I do. It's not something that I do. Halachically, I'm not proficient in what the halachas are per se in that. But I could say from a music perspective or a feeling or hashkafa perspective that, you know, there are times where Jewish music officially means that Jewish music you would buy by going into a Jewish bookstore or online from whichever, you know, place to sell Jewish music could be, you know, more harmful in that feeling of Hashem sometimes rather than a secular tune if it's, you know, a softer classical or whatever it may be. So it's very hard to say that, it was a secular tune that's written, you know, that's possible. Anything that was put out by a Jewish person, that's kosher. I don't think anyone would tell you that. You know, there are the time and place. Certainly, like I said, I don't do that. But, you know, by a chuppah, a lot of times people are singing not Jewish songs. I don't think that's the time and place to sing, you know, the song there should be sung that was written by a Jewish person, has that feeling. But, you know, I could tell you stories about that. But that's how I would define Jewish music and answer that question at the same time.
Do you do you perform to mixed crowds, and what is your feeling about performing and singers that do perform to mixed crowds?
Okay, so the answer is yes, I do. And you know, in my consultation with my Rebbeim and Rabbanim, you know, there's two areas. There's the hashkafa area, and then there's the halacha area. Halachas are the red lines. You know, hashkafa is more, you know, is the music, is my interpretation or the art form, and it's very hard for a Rav or a Pesach to say, oh, you know, that song you got to put in, you know, less bass, you need some more violins. You know, that I or whoever the singer is the artist. The same way you're not going to tell an artist, you know, use a little more black ink over there and red paint over there. It's, you know, that's one area. So we're really we have that responsibility. I could share that with you as well. But in terms of halacha, it actually came up many times. I speak with Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky. I've spoken with Rabbi Reisman. I've spoken with Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz in, you know, for matters in Eretz Yisrael. And the halacha psak that I got was, if the singing is not going to lead to a kalas roish atmosphere, you know, or a hilulous atmosphere, which is going to have the men and women do things that are not proper or whatever it is, then it would be forbidden. But if the singing is not done in such a way, then it's allowed. If there is a simcha where there's going to be dancing, I was told, you know, by my poskim that I should only do that if there is a mechitza or some sort of mechitza, if there's going to be dancing. I have a story about that also. That you know, one time I was actually hired for a bar mitzvah, And this is earlier when I first started, and now myself or my manager, we try to cross every T and dot every I in terms of every detail, but I neglected to mention that if there's going to be dancing, which naturally a bar mitzvah will have dancing, that there should be a mechitza. And the client was taken aback, was a little upset. There was nothing against them. They're wonderful, wonderful people, wonderful community, and they just were upset that I didn't mention that, and they kind of wanted me to bend on that back and forth. And I, when it comes to halacha, that's the psak I got. I said I'm not willing to do that. And what I did say though, I came up with an offer. I said, I feel bad. It was my mistake. I'm happy to come down free of charge to the bar mitzvah boy's school, do a whole full concert for his class. I won't charge you a penny. And they got back to me and they said, we really appreciate your mental cut, and we are going to, abide by that, and we'll have that mechitza. So that was, sometimes when you stick to your guns, Baruch Hashem, it does work out. But that's, halachically speaking, that's the psak I have in terms of, singing for mixed crowds.
Uh-huh. And what about what happens if somebody makes music today, a Jewish writer with Jewish words, but he's echoing the style? So he does a hip hop song with psukim, or he does what is I'm honestly not so familiar with contemporary music. He does.
I'll send you a few free CDs. Because
okay.
I enjoy.
What's your feeling about it? He does hip hop, or he does rap, or he does I don't know, rock and roll Jewish music.
So,
what's your feeling about that?
I'm not one to push the envelope. I'm not a trailblazer in that way. If you even call that trailblazing, to me it's the antithesis of Jewish music, and I do feel that I was once interviewed by a big radio show host in Israel, and he says to me, Baruch, you've put out a few albums by now, and I noticed you're still sticking to, a traditional trend, but the youth needs something, more exciting, because if we don't give it to them, and this is the argument. I don't know if you're interviewing any other singers, but maybe one day you will, and they'll tell you, Rav David, the youth, they need, we're losing them, and if we have to go down and give them this, because otherwise, you know how it goes. So
wait, but I would say it differently. Yeah. Otherwise, if you want to put the other spin on it,
sure,
we're not going to stay relevant, is what they would say.
Very good, excellent. We're not going to stay relevant. So to that I say, first of all, I told him, I said, well, your question answers itself. You're telling me everyone is doing that, so I said, okay, everyone is doing that. You don't need me. But of course we want to stay relevant. There's no question, and that is the debate. But that being said, I take mentorship also from A.B. Rottenberg, who I grew up with, who I'm sure you've heard of. And he once told me, we were sitting backstage at I think it was a Hask show, and we heard music that was extremely progressive. And he turns to me and he says, and I won't tell you which year of the show and which singer, no one will figure it out. I don't want to go that way. But he says, Baruch, we can't stop Yerida Sadoris, but we could slow it down. Now, A.B. Rottenberg is very relevant. I, Baruch Hashem, am very relevant, and there's no question styles change. The styles are changing. My last album is not the same as the first album in terms of the music. We can get into details on that also. People know that it's moving in a certain direction. But where do you draw the line? Where do you say, at what point do you say, okay, so what lines am I going to cross? Where is the line drawn? If you're not following some sort of, again, halacha, it's hard to say, but if you're not following some sort of misora in what we're doing, which singers came before us, what kind of music we were listening to. So where do you draw the line? What point? I know in other shilas, when it comes to relationship issues, right? There's shilas of people asking Rabbanim to do something, to save an Isser Karetz, let's say, and many will say no, let those people go where they have to go, but we have to keep the halacha, and to I say the hashkafa is to at a certain point. Many.
So Baruch, let me ask you the following question, and I'm not an expert in this, but I it's like I forgot who they said Rav Stein, they said it about they said that I forgot which American president wasn't so musical, so they said they asked him how many songs he knows. He says 2. One is Yankee Doodle Dandy and one isn't. Okay, so in that respect, maybe I'm inappropriate to be asked you, but let me ask you. I had on Sherwood Goffen, who teaches history of music at Yeshiva University, and he said he named them many songs that come from Jewish music, Hasidic music, etc., that he said come from he said a lot of the Mashgiach and Nigunim come from the waltzes at that time. I mean, Bach, Beethoven, they were playing waltzes in the Goyish music, so it became the style in the Jewish world. The Germans had their marches, and suddenly Yekhish music has marches, a lot of which are used, he said, in tefillin. He started, singing them. The Chabad, he said, the Niggin Napoleon is really so. What, and I don't ask this that I have an answer. I'm just putting the question out there. If the Baal HaTanya used Napoleon's music, that was the era, and Rav Shamshin Raphael Hirsch used German music, and the Mashgiach Rebbis used the current European Western. So a youngster would say today, well, that's great, and I'm sure Mozart then is what some rapper is today. Like, this is historically we have absorbed the culture, and I would say, and I would question. Let me just add on to that question: is it necessary? And I don't. By the way, I don't enjoy rip hop or rap, but I'm just asking. You have to be intellectually honest. Is that one of the reasons that Klal Yisrael went into Gullus, right, is because wherever Klal Yisrael went, we took the best out of the Gullus and we turned it into a Davar Kadesh. Maybe just like those Rebbis and Zamrim of the 1800s took from their music, maybe we should be appropriating from American music something wonderful, and that's also like taking something out of the Gullus. Like, why do we look at it more negatively now than they did 100 or 200 years ago in Europe?
That is the question, and the answer, the short answer is we are following the style, but the way you presented it is exactly the way I think we should, or we do follow the style, and that is they're doing it first, and it's widespread before we do, so to speak, because but it's our job to push it back a little bit, or more than a little bit, and there's also there's different forms of Jewish music. There's the entertainment simcha form where maybe that should be copied, if you see it should. And then there's the bakasha, tefillah, yearning, devekis form, which I think stayed a lot to tradition. I think so. Believe it or not, a large amount of my clientele listen to secular music. So why do they hire me? Because they want their Jewish music to be Jewish. That's what it means to them. I've sung. I was last year I did a Shabbos Slichos in a community in Florida, and the person I was staying by says, can we do an Onik Friday night? I said sure. I thought it, okay, 30, half hour, whatever it is. 4 hours, a room filled with 100 or so men who listen to secular music. It was a different kind of experience. So of course we're following that style, but we don't have to push the envelope. I'll give you a super visual example. Okay, those that wear black hats, right? So did our brims get smaller? They've gotten smaller, right? If you see a guy walk into shul with a very wide hat today, you say, okay, he's outdated. Maybe you'll say he's not relevant. But then there's the guy who walks in with with running into the future. Just like this is what everyone. He's finding it. He went to Paris or whatever it is. Again, it's a superficial example, but I think you can get my point.
Can I say, would your point be? Am I understanding you saying that even in the secular world, and I say the non-Jewish world, non-Jewish music, there's music that's considered tasteful, and there's music that's considered sort of a little bit over the edge. And you're saying, so as Jewish musicians, you say we have absorbed to a certain amount the style of the current Western music, but you push back where the music goes over the edge and it becomes, listen to an interesting Lashon HaMeiri, which is in the Meiri discusses in Gittin and Zion. He says, Kol Mine Zemer, he says all different types of music that are made with Tyrus Hailalus, that sort of that are prust. He says it's derech kalus reish, and he says it's nigunim that are meant to arouse in people more primitive feelings. He says arasa. He says, and it's hard to quantify because ein lo l'dayin b'dvarim elo ma she'ein of reish. How do you quantify what is untasteful music and tasteful music? And he says any music, he says, that's sheyesh bei divrei pritzas v'kalos reish would be yasser, but something that's meant l'oyer halavaves would be mutter. So you're saying in Western music it's sort of similar. You have taken out of it elements that sort of are fine, and you discard elements that you think are beyond the pale or edgy. Is that what you did? I?
Yeah, I was. The truth is, I was speaking more stylistically, but this that Meiri is saying, you're introducing even a halachic a halachic issue that might be a red line, because I think it is easy to quantify what is preaches immorality or his halalos.
Well, Baruch, thank you very much. It was an honor having you on with us.
Pleasure. Okay.
And keep being us with your beautiful, beautiful music. We very often by our Shabbos table sing your song V'Zakeni.
Thank you very much.
Kol tov v'gater. Bye-bye.
Okay, now we're going to announce the winners of the riddle. We do a raffle because we get more than one answer. That's correct. Last week, Yeshua Ellis from Detroit got one of the riddles, and Simcha Adler from Salford, England. And this week, our winner is Moshe Marcus from Lakewood, New Jersey. Got both answers correct. So we have England, Detroit, Lakewood. We're going around the globe. Well, mazel tov to the winners. We're going to send you out your reward, and good luck for this week's riddle.
Yes, hello, David. This is Yeshua Ellis from Detroit. I'd like to answer one of your questions from your riddles. The kasha you asked that Rashi brings down the pasuk in Yitain li Boruch Molei Beis Kesed Azov Le'uchol Avos Ti Hashem Lekai. Rashi brings up from here that it was a nefesh rechava u'mechamed mammon acherim. The kasha you asked is from the Mishnah Pirkei Avos Perek Vav Mishnah Tes on Rabbi ben Kisma, who also said a similar lashon. His lashon was Amalei Rebbi with Tzanchus Shasidei Marbim Kaimenu, and he said, Ani etum elef alpayim dinei zav v'avonim tovis margolios. So amartim li b'ni, im atem noisim li kol kesav zav v'avonim tovis margolios v'olam, eini dor elo makom Torah. So you ask the question, don't we see the same midah ra of nefesh rechava? So there's two ways of answering this question. One way of answering the question is that the whole kasha never started, and that would be one mahalach. The other way would be to answer the question with a teretz. So first I'm going to answer the question in the first mahalach, which is more like a brisker mahalach, but the question never started. The reason is because al-mashal l'ma'adavar doima. A person there's lots of money in a room full of gold and kesef, but it's locked. So somebody who wants to get into the room to get the money, but he can't. He doesn't have the key. He's trying very hard. He's trying to pick the lock. He's trying to get to it, but he can't get it. Nebuch. He has no key. He can't get the money, but he wants the money. And then the other situation is a person is in a room with lots of gold and silver, and it's in front of him, and he says, I don't want the gold. I don't want the silver. I'm not interested in it. I'd rather learn Torah. I'd rather do other pursuits. I don't need the money. There's an obvious difference. In the first case, he wants the money. He just cannot get the money.
In the second case, we see clearly he doesn't want the money. And that's the answer to this question, because Boruch said, I can't go against Hashem. As the pasuk says, Lo uchol la'avar. I'm not able to over the words of Hashem. Even if you give me molei beisai, Lo uchol la'avar. What's the pshat? I want the money. If I was able to over the Dvar Hashem, I would take the money. I have a desire, a taiva for the money. Lo uchol la'avar. Whereas by Yossi ben Kisma, he made a choice on his own. He says, Einei dor ela b'makom Torah. Even if you would give me kol kesef azav, v'avonim teivos v'mergolia shabaylam, I'm choosing to be only dor b'makom Torah. He had a choice. He could have done either one. He chose to live only in a makom Torah. That's verkehrt. From this ma'aseh of Yossi ben Kisma, we see verkehrt. He has no desire for money. Where you could get the money, and where it's possible to get the money, and afal pikein, you don't want the money, that ma'aseh proves to us that he doesn't have a nefesh rechava. That Torah by him is the most important thing. Whereas by Boruch, the only reason that he didn't take the money is because lo uchal la'avar al dvar Hashem, he couldn't be over on dvar Hashem. But otherwise, if he could be over dvar Hashem, he would have taken the money. So this proves to us that he had a nefesh rechava. But for Kert, Yossi ben Kisma, the ma'aseh by Yossi ben Kisma proves to us, pum for Kert, that Yossi ben Kisma had no desire for a moment. This text is ke'ein this chidah in Sefer Rashi Avos says this ke'ein zeh. I'm just touching it up a little bit, and also the Divrei Maritz also says this teretz also. They both asked the kasha. Now, as far as the teretz on the kasha, so Teretz Mima asked the kasha, and he says the teretz is that it depends how you were approached. In other words, by Yossi ben Kisma, he was approached by this gevir to give him elef alpayim dinar zav. So lefi his approach, lefi his offer, Yossi ben Kisma answered him back. Whereas by Bilam, he himself dreamed this whole thing up about, he was never offered this kind of money. He dreamed it up and he said, oh, if you give me if you give me molei beisoi, I lavel dvar Hashem. So therefore the nafkamir is if you're approached with it, you're answering the person back, that doesn't prove anything that you have a nefesh rechava. That's just answering the person his question that he asked you, you answer him back. That's one teretz, and then there's another teretz that says that there's a big chilek by Bilam. Over there it says, "In yitin bolak molei beisai." Oh, so there's another teretz. This kasha is brought down also in the Medrash Talpiyos, and he brings down from Tosfos to ask the kasha. And basically, it says is that the difference is that Yossi ben Kisma said something which is Shar. You can't give someone kol hakesef shabaylam. So kochach. Yossi ben Kisma never meant it seriously as a option that he should get that money because it's impossible to give him that money. Bilam said it as a finite amount, molei beisai. It's possible to get such amount of money, so you could say he's a nefesh rechava. But Yossi ben Kisma, he said it as a thing which is an impossibility. So why did he say it? So there are different pshat on why he said it. One pshat is because he wanted to say that no matter how much money you give me, Torah is not worth the amount of money. Afilu kol mammon shabaylim is not worth the amount to live in a makom Torah. Or he was saying to him that just like you can't give me all the money in the world, there's no way that you're going to ever convince me of going ahead and leaving a makom Torah. He was just saying as a mashal to teach him that I'm never leaving a makom Torah. And thirdly, you could say also as well that there was a lesson over here that he was saying to him that usually it doesn't go together. There's a goyen that says that anything that's difficult, the pshat is that the Yetzer Hara is trying to fight against it. If it's very easy, that means that the Yetzer, it doesn't come usually from a Yetzer Tov, it's from a Yetzer Hara, because for the mitzvah, if something difficult, the Yetzer Hara would try to sway you against doing it. So here also, he said, even if you give me all the money in the world, that would prove to me that this is all the Yetzer Hara, because then you're making it so easy to learn Torah and to support Torah and support yeshivas and so forth, that can't be a Maisa Taiv, and therefore I'm not going to accept your position. He was just trying to tell him that the amount of money you want to give me is so much, it must be there's some Yetzirah involved, therefore it's not worth it for me to go. Which also answers the question why he didn't even take the money to start a koil, to build the yeshiva, build a Makom Torah, because once he saw that it was so easy, he understood that there are other underlying things over here that the Yetzirah is interested that there should be, that he should move there, and it'll be a churban. Anyway, I wish you lots of atzlacha and bracha. Very interesting show we had last week. Like usual, you have interesting shows, and Mitzvah Hashem, the Baruch should give you bracha of atzlacha and all this harbatzah Torah. Zay gesund and kol tov.
Hello, regarding the question about Orah Shulchan's Chiddush, about that if you start davening before Sofman Tefillah, you can carry on, how it stems with the Radvaz, and the Magen Avraham brings in Tov Chavov, that Kiddush Levana, if the moon flickers away in the middle of Kiddush Levana, that you can't carry on. However, the tshuva is quite poshet, that the problem with the Levana, if it's not there, then you can't, the whole Metzias of Kiddush Levana pasnish, you haven't got Levana, it's not din in Zman. All Chiddush of the Orah Shulchan is Halacha in something of Zman. Shachar is better is a Tefillah. There's a Zman which Chazal will kaveh, a certain Zman that you can daven. So on that, the Orah Shulchan is Mechadish. If you started the Iketoli on the Scholas Zman, once the Scholas Zman was right, then you can carry on. Kiddush Levana that you can't say when there's no Levana, has nothing to do with his Zman. It's a Metzias. If there's no Levana, you can't say Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana, the Chefts of Kiddush Levana is when there is a Levana. If there's no Levana, passage the whole Chefts of Kiddush Levana. And that passt nicht bechlal the whole Chiddush of the Orah Shulchan L'chayr. Kol Tov, a große Sprech.
Yellow Agdvach. As far as the Shaila, that why we mentioned as a chus that Moshe Rabbeinu hit the rock and came out water, if that was the chet of the Meimeriva, so the Maisa, I think the simple answer, I think and that would just, make the question not begin, is that it doesn't say that it's referring to the time that he hit the rock by the Meimeriva. There was an earlier time in Shemois Yud Zayin Vav where Moshe Rabbeinu was actually commanded to hit the rock, and so there was a Shmocha told him to hit the rock, and he hit the rock and came out water. So the Chayra question doesn't begin. Even if you say that somehow it's also referring to the chet to the water that came out by Meimeriva, so L'maisa, although Rashi brings a medrash that says that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to speak to the rock, the Rashi brings later on in Parshas Zos HaBrocha from the Sifri that sounds like that the chet was actually something different, and the Rambam goes with this in Shemona Prokim in Perek Dalid that the chet was that he showed a certain element of kas when he said Shimon HaMoirim, and which doesn't mean that Moshe Rabbeinu actually had kas, but since he showed kas and since it wasn't called for because Hakadosh Baruch Hu didn't show any kas, and so Fimaji Gosai, there was a certain element of chet, and Ayin V'Rambam Shom. So according to that, the actual hitting of the rock was not the chet, and according to the Rambam and the Friedrich of Pashas HaSifri, so then also we want to have a question even by the Meimeriva, because the hitting of the rock was not the problem. Additionally, even if you go with the Halacha of Rashi, so that he was supposed to actually speak to the rock. The Meiser, Rashi himself, like I mentioned, brings this a free that says that this whole idea of the Chet Meriva, that Moshe Rabbeinu died and Aaron died, was sort of like, so to speak, an excuse, because this is part of what Hashem's plan was, and I believe, and I think this is the most commonly way it's explained, is that we know that if Moshe Rabbeinu had gone into Yisrael because of the Gevaldig Tzidkus of Moshe Rabbeinu, so therefore, what would have happened is that we wouldn't have been able to have a Churban Beis HaMikdash. And if we wouldn't be able to have a Churban Beis HaMikdash, we wouldn't be able to have a Tikkun, because our Tikkun was because Kila Chamasei Al Eitzim V'Avonim, and Klal Yisrael was able to survive. And because Klal Yisrael was not holding on the Madrega, that we would not need that Tikkun, so therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was not able to go, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, created some kind of excuse, so to speak, and it could be possible to say that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even have a chira on this thing. I mean, really, the Mashgiach says that B'chlal, after Hasinah, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have a chira. Just in order to be Shefeil B'Chaim Olam, it has to be that he can't have a chira. So if you say like that, so then it comes out that's actually just the opposite. Because of Moshe Rabbeinu's tzidkus, and therefore he wouldn't be able to go to Eretz Yisrael. So that's why this whole alila, so to speak, had to happen, and that therefore we could touch into the discussion b'tzidkoi choin chashasmayim, because of his tzidkus. He should give us water, because actually the whole thing happened because of Moshe Rabbeinu's tzidkus. As far as the second shaila about the mechatas that it sounds like you're allowed to step on it, and the question is, why is it different than tzitzis and sukkah? So it could be that, we find marshal by sukkah, we find chalshim shemayim al sukkah. Tzitzis, it says, Yisem Ma'isa is Chadam Shkomet Hashem. It brings the kedusha. So the tachlis of these mitzvahs is, of course, we don't know the reason for mitzvahs. So, the tzura of the mitzvah is a mitzvah of a positive value. The purpose of the mechatos is a vehicle whereby a person gets to tahara. I mean, would you say that water of a mikveh you have to treat with, you're not allowed to step on the water of the mikveh? I would assume that you wouldn't say that because, even though it's make a bracha on going on your mechuyev to go to mikveh. However, the water is a vehicle. That's the tzur of the mitzvah. It's a vehicle to bring about tahara. So therefore, it's a whole different tzur. It's a mitzvah, and that, therefore, being that mitzvah inherently b'chlal, really, like you're saying, mitzvah, the mitzvah, the etzim should be able to throw out because it doesn't have kedusha inherently after its usage. That we should be able to throw it out. Just the problem is being mevazed, so there's no kedusha. It doesn't have a din kedusha on it. And so here where that surah is like you're saying, not a positive surah. So therefore, once it's done with, finished with, so therefore there's doesn't have that that halacha that perhaps would be the answer. And
well, that wraps things up for today. Thank you very much for listening. This is David Lichtenstein here at the Yeshiva Shalmaila. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you send to Oris, we will try to respond to them either by voice or in writing. Thank you so much. Kol Tov.